Hello, my name is Natasha Holder, and I'm going to be doing a video presentation over my senior capstone project. The initial idea of producing the project that I did was to bring light the mental health issues that can occur within the emergency medical field. As an EMT myself, I am looking to one day broaden my horizons and gain my paramedic degree. I thought that by bringing some of these matters to the forefront, I may be able to learn more about what it takes to be a mentally prepared paramedic in the future, and a better EMT while I'm at it. Because I still am an EMT, so I would also like to be mentally prepared as I am now. I strive to hit some very important parts of the world of EMS to notify people of some of the struggles that EMT and paramedics go through while on the job. While executing the initial plan, many barriers did get in my way. I originally wanted to go to the EMS station and individually interview paramedics about their mental health during and after they got off their shift. This was unfortunately put on hold as the COVID-19 pandemic stopped a good amount of my progress. I was ultimately laid off for having a decrease in our call volume and wasn't allowed to spend time in the station due to potential exposure and spread of the coronavirus COVID-19. With that being said, I thought that there were many even really helpful lessons to learn with this newly presented barrier. As an aspiring paramedic, there are very real things that I would have to deal with as an EMS worker. Being a medical professional in a worldwide pandemic is something that not everyone has said that they got to be a part of before. This presents a whole new set of issues and problems that could arise in this field. I wanted to find out how working during a pandemic changed the mental health and daily living of paramedics and how they are learning to cope with this change. The purpose of this project was to spark change. I don't believe anything will ever be the same after a pandemic like COVID-19. It has changed the daily lives of everyone, regardless of their work. But considering my interest in becoming a paramedic, EMS was the field that I put my focus on. We all turned to the essential workers when the craziness set in about the pandemic. It were these essential people and EMS workers on the front lines, risking exposure of their own lives to save the lives of others and bring comfort to their communities. I hope with this project I can inform others about the importance of value that we put into the men and women that work in these careers, and that we may do whatever we can in the future to protect them and ourselves from this ever happening in the same way again. I also hope to gain a deeper understanding and gain some more perspective of the minds of those working through this and know what it feels like to come out on the other side with a little more tact and well-being. To be a member of the Powell County Ambulance Service, or PCAS, is an honor not to be taken too lightly. Many people in the community are very familiar with the faces that show up when you call 911, and many of them know us outside of our job as well. PCAS takes a lot of pride in the work that we do. We are not only a service, but we also work for the community. We don't just do what it takes to get the job done, we get to know the people that we're working with. We won't just show up and take you to the hospital. We talk to you, we get to know you, and we take a very holistic approach to medicine. My big interview was longtime paramedic Amy Tharp. Amy has been a paramedic for 6 years and an EMT for 14 years before that. She has worked in both Powell County and Menifee County, Kentucky, but has spent most of her 18 years in EMS at Powell County Ambulance Service. Amy also serves as a shift supervisor at her work and also has been in the running for medical director in the past. I thought it would be very fitting to interview Amy, as she has had a lot of time and experience put in working at this service and would have prior knowledge and new information about the changes she has personally went through during this transformation. The first question that I asked Amy was, how has being a paramedic during a pandemic affected you personally? Amy replied by saying that personally, she doesn't feel all too affected by it. She mentions that as a mindful health professional, that she always takes hand washing and sanitizing very seriously. She mentions that this type of awareness is something that she has always had to carry with her, as she is never able to be fully aware of what every person she comes into contact with may or may not have. She is always at risk of being exposed to something while on calls and in physical contact with the public. We are always required as EMS workers to have a certain amount of appropriate personal protective equipment when we come into contact. We are never fully aware or in knowledge of what someone may have. And so having this basic PPE is something that EMS workers have to do on a daily basis, and any health professional. The second question that I asked Amy was what sort of things have changed for EMS workers when the pandemic started. Amy replied by saying that there are some new protocols put into place. Dispatch, which is the people that kind of give communication between the public and EMS. They are the people that you call 911 and they pick up the phone and then they dispatch us out to where you live. So dispatch now has to notify the EMS station over the radio when they suspect a COVID-19 exposure. And they must all wear the correct and appropriate personal protective equipment. On typical calls, we usually only wear gloves unless we are suspecting of something else occurring. And so now that we know that something like COVID-19 is happening, and dispatch alerts us of that before we go to a call, we now have to go ahead and use all that personal protective equipment that we would use for that type of exposure. Amy does mention, though, that when it comes to an average call, they still only wear gloves into the home upon contact with the patient. Exposure is something that they deal with on a daily basis. So being aware of how they conduct themselves on non-suspected COVID-19 calls, they still behave in the same manners as they did before while maintaining appropriate PPE. Amy also explained that many people who were part-timers were laid off. Some of those people included myself, because they couldn't afford the extra people with their new low call volume, and now every day when they come into work, they have to take their temperature and sign a health assessment that determines they are healthy enough to work during the day. This included sending something to our shift supervisor and or our director saying that our temperatures were good enough and our symptoms were not there, and that we were not showing symptoms of COVID-19 in order to work that day. This is followed by mentioning that anytime they have a suspected COVID-19 patient or exposure, that they are required to decontaminate the truck twice, as well as wash their clothes and shower as soon as they get back to the station. This is to prevent the exposure from spreading to other workers, to prevent the exposure from spreading to other patients as they go through the day on other calls. The next question that I asked Amy was how the pandemic has affected her mental health as an EMS worker. She explains that personally it doesn't affect her mental health much. Amy has always been a homebody, especially when getting off of a long 24-hour shift at the EMS station. She says that staying indoors when she wasn't at work wasn't a hard thing for her to do. But during her shift, there were some things that changed in the public's eye. Amy explains that she gets some pretty nasty looks when she is out in public in her uniform. She goes on to say that she tries to not let it bother her, as some people actually thank her for the work that she does, but that the disgust she has gotten at stores, gas stations, or really any public place was enough for her to take notice and be somewhat bothered by it. She said that she definitely got some very disgusted looks her way when she would go to the store or get gas in the ambulance or outside of work if people knew that she was a paramedic. Amy went on to explain that the biggest demise to her mental health was not being able to spend much needed time with her friends and family. This is very important for many EMS workers when it comes to mental health. Not only do we have to worry about our 24-hour shifts and being tired and maybe not even getting food, but especially if you have a really bad call in general, it doesn't even have to be COVID-19 exposure. It could be something such as going on scene to a child being injured or a really bad car accident or CPR or anything like that. It is so important for all EMS workers to be able to talk and spend time with their loved ones, especially after something that has really shooken them inside. Mentally, it's very important to reach out and be able to spend time and talk to your friends and family. So that was one of the toughest things, especially with this exposure going on, that she was not able to do as an EMS worker. She also mentions that it has bothered her that she can't be as close to her patients as she used to be. As I mentioned in the introduction, PCAS, or Powell County Ambulance Service, is a facility that prides themselves on being just as emotional supporters as they are physical ones. Amy loves to talk to her patients openly and get to know every individual as the person they are and the stories they hold rather than just getting a patient somewhere. Having physical restrictions and different mindfulness about closeness, Amy feels saddened about not being able to connect with her patients as well as she used to. There's an ongoing joke in the EMS world that we are not just trained to be EMTs and paramedics, but that we are also very highly trained therapists and friends. You will never understand the type of conversations that you have in the back of a truck with somebody. We try our best to see our patients as people rather than just patients. A lot of times it's not all physical wounds that these people carry, but also very much so mental and emotional ones too. And sometimes it just takes being able to talk to someone and have someone listen to you to really get through tough times. And that's what we definitely try to bring to the truck and to our patients when we go out on calls. The last question that I asked Amy was what she expects is to come of all of this for EMS. In other words, what does she think is left to come for EMS workers and even the world when this pandemic has ended? Amy concluded by saying that there will be some new rules in place, she believes. Certain situations in EMS will always call for certain precautions. It will be something forever lingering in the back of the mind of every EMS worker when they go on a call. The PPE, sanitizing, and preparation for these kind of events will be watched more carefully, and in general, Amy explains that this is a learning experience. Not many people, especially EMS workers, have had to work on a truck through a scary pandemic. She can only hope that things will be different so that nothing like this will happen again. In conclusion, after all of the conversation that I had with Amy and the interview that I conducted, and just being able to have a lot of this information brought to my forefront, I do believe that I set out to learn all this information and convey it to my audience, and I do think that I was able to adequately convey that. I got to talk to a very seasoned and well-rounded paramedic about her experience with something that not many people have ever experienced. Information about the situation that I didn't know before. And though I have worked in EMS for 3 years as an EMT, though it is part-time, I definitely have had a little bit of experience here and there with exposure and really heartbreaking calls. And this is something that, as a 3-year EMS worker, I have never had to deal with and not even have anything close to the same kind of thing. So not only does this really educate people that are not a part of the field, but it really educates people that are part of it. This is something that, not everyone has gotten to experience and may never experience in the future, but it definitely helps knowing this information now had something like this happen in the future. Even if it is the same thing or something different, it's definitely good that we learn from this situation. And I think that through this and through her testimony, that this is something that we can definitely learn from. I believe that the answers that Amy provided, that she does deliver sufficient evidence to prove the significance of not only EMS workers, but any essential worker during this time and at all times. I definitely believe that coming out of this, we will have a more open mind and appreciation for the people that were having to work through this while everyone else was quarantined. A lot of times EMS workers are not as thanked and appreciated as you think they were, and we are definitely not in this job for the appreciation or recognition, but there are definitely times that people do not put our health above their own or even to the same extent of their own, and they have no regard for the way that we are treated during these times. And not only EMS workers, but any essential worker, whether you are working in mail or you're a police officer, firefighter, you're a health professional, you're a grocery store worker, any of those things. I do believe that these are the kind of interviews that really get people thinking about those individuals that were out there working for the needs of others while this was going on, risking their own exposure, their own lives to help the community. I believe that awareness was brought about when it comes to the treatment of the people risking their lives in the way that we perceive them. I think that the ideas that were discussed will lead to spark change in how we handle the situation and how we may handle the situation in the future. Most of all, I believe that this project and interview prepared me for some very unforeseen things that I may deal with as a future paramedic. I think that hearing these wise words from Amy taught me not only the physical things to do to be alert in these trying conditions, but also how to care for myself mentally, given I come to experience these circumstances in the future. If anything, I grew a deeper love and understanding for the field that I hope to stay a part of and succeed further in one day. I see the people risking their own lives to save others, and I see myself there with them, riding to where the 911 calls come in and doing whatever it takes to bring people to comfort. I sincerely hope that this project opened the eyes of those unaware of the EMS workers who give their all for their careers and gives an inside look of the people behind the uniform that I hope to one day wear and be more grateful of the dedication that it symbolizes. I hope that this project taught you, the audience, something that you didn't know. It definitely taught me a lot about what it means to be a paramedic. I think that for sure it has, in so many ways, helped prepare me a whole lot more to what it takes to bring my medical profession um, more knowledge. This is something that not even Amy, as an 18-year paramedic, has had to deal with. And now that it's something that we've all had to learn from, I do hope to take this information and knowledge with me in the future, and it does make me even more excited to be a paramedic. So thank you so much for watching, and I hope you learned just as much as I did through this.